we've been out here on the forefront fighting for social justice. And then, as I said earlier, along came Kim. How many of you understand that the importance of the circuit attorney? That person decides whether or not charges are filed in a particular case or not. I have the highest respect for Kim in that her office, immediately upon her taking office, charged Jason Stockley, that killer cop of Anthony Lamar Smith. As well as the fact that her office did a great job. If you had, I sat in on much of the trial, did a great job. And it was no kind of way that officer should have walked. But we know that justice is not blind. And you had a racist judge, she's not saying it, I'm saying this, who allowed the other racists to walk. I salute Kim because she had the audacity to say that she is not afraid of the sitting governor named Eric Gardner, and went forward in terms of pursuing an indictment of her. But more importantly than that, she also had the audacity to put on an exclusionary list a number of rogue police officers that infuriated the racist, I'm saying it, Zaki Baruti, St. Louis Police Association. But also she understands what mass incarceration has done to tear our communities apart and families.
Amen.
So I'll be damned as a black man to allow her to be attacked and not stand up to defend her. So to that end, and I thank all of our members and other organizational people to stand with her. So on that note, I thank you for being very patient, but we all rise to greet our circuit attorney, Ms. Kim Gardner.
Everybody for standing for me. Thank you so much. That's really an honor and a privilege to be your circuit attorney for the city of St. Louis. But I want to say thank you for allowing me to be here to commemorate Marcus Garvey. This is humbling because I was reading something. I was thinking like what I'm going to say at the Marcus Garvey celebration. And I was turning the pages of just looking at some stuff that I had, and it was interesting that when I hear that Mr. Garvey started the United African People's, I guess, institution, he was in New York and he was selling stock. So he was organizing people to come, go back to Africa, go back to your roots, trying to tell people that, boundaries of where you're at. You should go back home and be a part of people who care. And it was just really inspiring for many people who were struggling at that time, where many of people who look like me and you were not free. And it was interesting when I was reading this article because it was in a legal journal. It was really interesting. It was actually an ABA news article, and it was on the very back of the page of the magazine. And it basically said that a young J. Edgar Hoover heard about Marcus Garvey, heard about all the people he was energizing, the positive. They called him a radical at the time. And he's an intern now, and he says, we need to start looking into this. And even J. Edgar Hoover wrote in his notes that there was nothing illegal about what Marcus Garvey was doing, but he had this shipping company, and he started selling stock for $5. And they started looking at paperwork, and they said something's wrong with the paperwork. And then all of a sudden, that's where the mail fraud became. an issue. And Marcus Garvey, I guess it was him and 4 other people, he was the one that stood up and defended himself against the federal government. And he lost. And that's why he was convicted. And he was actually deported back to Jamaica, and then he ended up living in London where he died. But why I say this is because when I was looking at this, it was kind of a parallel when you're trying to change a system as a circuit attorney. I'm not comparing myself to Marcus Garvey by no means, but it was kind of interesting because I had another speech that I was going to say today, but it was interesting how people can take the laws and to manipulate them to attack people for a political agenda, and that's what this case with Marcus Garvey represented. And it's the same thing as going on that you hear about what's going on in the circuit attorney's office and the attacks against my office and myself and my reforms. It's a political attack. It started with a case called Greatness. It started with that. And I don't know if you guys heard that this past week, the special prosecutor still said there may be an open grand jury to come. So we have to pay attention to these things. And this is not, like I'm saying, when I'm saying this is not about Kim Gardner. This is not about Kim Gardner. This is about each and every one of you. This is about someone who you put in office to change a system that is beyond broken. It needs to be torn down and rebuilt.
That's right.
I think about, when I think about people who hold on to the status quo, and that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who hold on to the status quo. They want things to be the same. Everybody's comfortable with things being the same. And I ask you, with that comfort, what have we lost? We have lost, it's interesting when I hear people fighting against the circuit attorney to hold police accountable like we hold anyone else accountable. But they offer no alternatives, because to be an effective prosecutor, to be effective law enforcement, you have to have credibility. And when that credibility is at issue, our job is we have to hold everyone accountable like we hold anyone who breaks the law. We have people who fight against my rights to correct injustices that we all know. We have a case right now, I can't go into it, Mr. Lamar Johnson. Pay attention to that case. We right now, I have to fight to correct injustice. Just listen to that. The prosecutor is fighting to correct injustice. And then we hear about what's called mass incarceration. We all know the effects of mass incarceration. We hear it and see it every day. We see young people dying on these streets. Their opportunities being cut off so quickly because this senseless hopelessness that we fail to address. We always talk about more police, more prosecutions. But I tell people, we have to be proactive, because until we address the root causes of why that young person or that woman or that man pick up that gun and decide to take things in their own hands, we have to understand that hurt and that pain, that thought process that person is going to. I tell people, many people want me to talk to families who are victims of violent crimes, and I do. And it's disgusting and it hurts me when I have to tell a person, yes, I'm going to hold that individual accountable that harmed your loved one. But we have to be before that loved one gets harmed. We have to be before that 7-year-old Xavier Nsonga was shot and killed senselessly. We have to be before all these other babies that have been killed this summer senselessly. We have to help our communities that are suffering. And because what prosecutor is saying that we have to prosecute, we will prosecute to the fullest. That's one end of the spectrum. We also have to try to prevent that violent instance from happening. That is not saying that you're not going to be a tough prosecutor But you also have to understand to address violent crime, we have to address the root causes. We have to address the public health issues. It's crucial, and without doing that, we're going to continue to see the violent instances like we're doing, and we offer no other solution. Because we can have 100 more thousand police on the streets, and we can have 100 more prosecutors in those courtrooms. That's not going to just save those lives. So we have to do a better job as our city of really having a real conversation about how to address the issues that we all know. We're dealing with poverty. We're dealing with pain. We're dealing with trauma. We have young people who have the effects of a war veteran.
That's right.
And we do nothing about it. We wait till something happens where they act out, and now we put them in the system and say, give them all the help. That's backwards. We should be giving people the help before they get into the system. Give these families an opportunity so they can thrive, so they can live, so we all can have a quality of life. And what I tell people, until we address the root causes, how do you expect people who are dealing with hopelessness to care about your family, my family, or anybody else's family? But we have to have a better conversation in our city. We have to have a tough conversation about the racial divide, racial inequality. And we have to talk about race because, unfortunately, that is what the system is built off of. And until we have real conversations that include these multifaceted problems, we're going to continue to do the same things. But I want to assure you, and I want to show you a video that we are doing something different in our office. Of course, we're going to have criticism because we are tough on crime, but we're smart on crime. We have to be smart on crime because when we put someone in the system, we are changing that person's life. We're changing that family's life of that person. We're changing a course of groups of people, and we have to, as prosecutors, understand that we must put those violent crime drivers in the system, but we can also save people at the same time, and we can protect public safety by looking at crime on a continuum. What we're doing is we're trying to give hope to people that sometimes feel like no one cares. And it's imperative that the prosecutor's office be a part of that because we have a lot at stake. We determine who we charge, what we charge. That's powerful. We forever change a person's life, for good or bad. But we have to start saving lives. Everybody always, wants to judge me on a conviction rate. Well, I want to ask you, when prosecutors before me for 16 years said that their conviction rate was 95%, when you saw that violent crimes continue to rise, what does that mean? Those conviction rates do nothing or mean anything. Let's have a save rate. How many people we can save in this system? Bringing it back to why we're here, Mr. Marcus Garvey, because he inspires me. He's one of the people that I look to in teachings because a lot of things I'm going through it, when I read in history, when you're in a position and you're trying to make changes, it's not about you. But I think about Marcus Garvey, I think about Malcolm X, I think about Harriet Tubman, I think about all the people who paved the way for me to even be up here. And I think about when people talk about you, you must be doing something right. When people are trying to forgive you for doing your job, you're doing something right. When the police union is coming as hard as they're coming, you're doing something right. Because I'm going to tell you this, it's not about me. I'm fighting. Because I'm fighting for a fair and just system. And when I went to law school, that's what they taught me. The laws apply equally to everyone. And I'm going to make sure, as a prosecutor of the city of St. Louis, the laws are applied equally to everyone. And we have to talk to these young kids. We have to start energizing them because what you're seeing is history. You're seeing a system that's been in place in St. Louis. We're the ground zero for a lot of this reform. around the country. When I go around the country and I talk to other prosecutors and talk about St. Louis, and I tell them, I said, look, we are the ground zero for what you guys are doing, but we have to continue to fight to do any of this in our own backyard. That's disturbing. Mike Brown in the Ferguson protest kind of like started the conversation of what prosecutors do, kind of how the power of the prosecutor. And so we can't give up. We can't say, well, Kim Gardner's here, and now Mr. Wesley Bell's in the county, and they okay. We're not okay. We're not okay. But it's not about Kim Gardner. It's about who you decide to put in place. Hopefully it's me coming up August 4th, 2020. Kim Gardner is still running. Kim Gardner is still going to kind of push forward because it is not over. The things you asked me to do have not been even, we haven't scratched the surface of what we're going to do. The reform efforts are alive and well. And just end with a beautiful quote from Marcus Garvey. Chance has never yet satisfied the hope of a suffering people. Action, self-reliance, the vision of self, and the future have been the only means by which the oppressed have seen and realized the light of their freedom on their own freedom. We have to realize what is at stake. We have to realize what's going on in this city. We have to start telling the nation that we have a lot of change. This is the home of the Dred Scott. Home of many, if you read that opinion, and you had the Supreme Court basically characterize a black man as cattle, as a pet. And we talk about the laws and the things that we're going through. So that's why I fight. I fight for those people who fought for me to even be here, fought for the right for me to stand here to make a difference. And I appreciate it. And we have to teach these young people because these young people don't even know that. And it's scary. But I thank you. I humbly thank you for your support and thank you for the privilege of being the circuit attorney, your circuit attorney in the city of St. Louis. Thank you. Most of those cases, it's about payment. It's not about criminal cases. We're not like the county who had more criminal prosecutions of child support, but we do have more civil, and we have some criminal cases, but they're handled, you know, to get the person back on track to pay.
So is your policy not to imprison those?
No, we don't. From under my regime, we don't imprison anyone for child support. Now, they may have some other issues where they're going to jail on some other issues, but my philosophy and my policy is we're getting people back on track with child support. In terms of bail bond reform, as well as sentencing reform, we had them come in. I opened up my data to them, and what we're doing is we're training our prosecutors to have fair recommendations. No longer is it just if and or this, then this. And what I tell my prosecutors is we have to look at the public safety and public harm. It's a harm reduction model. So when you have individuals who have lower level nonviolent offenses, what we're doing, we're diverting most of those individuals to our young offender program. That's a 17 to 25 age group. Those are individuals who are more likely to be victims of crime as well as perpetrators of violent crime. We're trying to get them earlier. We have a felony redirect program. Those are any age, but those are individuals that we do a risk assessment. That is not the only tool we assess. We look at their background, we look at their history. We hook people up with services like trauma-informed counseling, cognitive behavior therapy. We hook people up with health care because health access, one of the problems we see, if people don't have a healthy mind, healthy body, they cannot even begin to manage their case. And what we're doing is diverting those low-level nonviolent offenders to an alternative where all my programs, if you complete, we dismiss your case. So you will no longer have that case. Now, the problem we have and what we're going to be pushing this year going to Jeff City is I want an automatic expungement because our expungement laws, we changed them and they're actually worse. We want an automatic expungement for that arrest if you complete a diversion program. Because what we want to do is once we get that case off, you still have that arrest, and you still have to go, time has to pass, and not every type of crime that we take is expungible. When I was a state legislator, when they changed the law, we basically made it worse. And so we have some crimes like stealing over $500. Now you may say, well, a thief, we don't need to expunge a person who steals something, but if a person is 18 years old, you can steal a cell phone, and that could be over $500. That's a felony under the laws of the state of Missouri. If that person would usually get probation, walk probation down, that type of crime is not expungible, no matter what. So they can never go into the financial banking industry. They can never go into computer security industry. It's a lot of things that prevent you with that one case, even if they had a suspended imposition of sentence, which the courts will tell you that is not a conviction under the law. But we have to do a better job, and we have to change that. So we're going to push for going forward to expunge automatically these arrests once any individual completes our diversion program. But that's what we're doing. We're diverting low-level nonviolent offenders. But what I need you guys to do is to push for more funding, because a lot of times I created these programs out of my existing budget. I did not have additional money. We had originally the Board of Aldermen put an additional amount of money, and I want to thank each and every one of them. And President Lewis Reed, he supported that. But then the funding goes away. And so you have to constantly put the funding back in the budget every year. And so we're just asking that you saw on our video, it takes we save the city 95% less if we put them in these programs than if we hold them in jail, which we spend $31,000. So we have to do better to get people in a better place, because I believe that if we want to make our city safe and prevent these instances, we have to give nonviolent individuals alternatives, and we have to do a better job of having more options. And I want to create more programs, because I believe that I should be focused on those crime drivers, those violent instances, those murders, those rapes, those violent tendencies, those cases where a person's life is affected. And I'm not saying a person's life is not affected by a car thief or something else, but I think there's alternatives that we can do. A lot of victims in those cases want their restitution. In our diversion programs, they pay back restitution at 100%. So this is not taking away accountability. This is not saying that the victim should not be made whole, but this is a more efficient way and effective way to not to cause further harm in our community by fueling mass incarceration. I don't really like to talk about the police union, but I'll talk about the police union because I think that's the question. One of the things that the police union has done, the police union has organized, and they are for a voice for individual officers. And so when you look at their function is one-sided and biased to the police and what the police sometimes are going through in their workplace. But in terms of accountability and credibility and the job that I have to do as a prosecutor, I have to treat the police like any other witness. If a witness is not truthful, we don't use that witness to make that case. And if I have credibility issues of a person who happens to be a certain occupation, I am treating them no differently than I treat any other witnesses that we deem not to be credible. And I think that's what we have to start educating the population and the community. I know people in here are educated about that, but you would think that people would say, okay, well, if a person is not credible, you're not using that person, that's okay. We can use other people, and that's what we're doing. But I'm not going to back down to what's right. And our job is to pursue justice and fairness. And if you're not credible, I can't pick and choose when you choose to be credible. I'm just not going to do that. So it's holding people accountable. It's not specific to any specific officers. It's we have to have tough conversations. But I implore people to ask Mr. Jeff Rorta, who says I'm one of the worst prosecutors he's ever known in history. I'm also the worst politician and most corrupt politician, but he's a disgraced police officer. I really don't care. He can speak this divisiveness because he's calling to energize the negativity and divisiveness that is the holding on to the status quo. When we look at 1 in 3 African American men are affected by the criminal justice system, that's serious. Something is wrong. And we look at what the system has done to communities that have been over-policed, over-prosecuted, and how violent crime is still festering, and the lack of mistrust is still growing. We have to build trust. And like I tell officers, and they get mad with this saying, I'm not gonna ask a witness or a victim to do what you won't do. So stop coming around here saying you need to snitch on X, Y, and Z. I want people to participate, but they gotta believe in the process, and we're trying to build trust. It's not about snitching, it's about holding people accountable. But people are afraid. And so when you ask people to do something, then you should tell when you see an officer doing wrong also. We need people who are out here in the community to help us to reach more kids, because right now we're in 3 schools. We're in Gateman, Walbridge, and Carnahan. We are doing a pilot program, youthful diversion program. We're trying to divert young people before they get into any system, because of course you guys know that I'm not over juvenile, so I'm trying to prevent them from getting to any system. So we need people to help volunteer with us to do this work, to refer kids as well as help mentor kids. That is key. So, of course, Mr. Khatib, he's my community engagement person. He can give you a card, but we just need people to help us, because that's what we're trying to do, build a network of people in the community that can help us, because we can't do it alone. So, thank you.
Come before the courts as a result of plea bargains. And as you know, so many brothers are locked up for a period of time, and a year passes, they're still locked up because of the bail system. And as a result, prosecutors come to them and say, well, look, we can get you off if you would cop a plea on 2 of these 5 counts, okay? They may have never committed the case, but because they've been locked up for so long, they can get off. But still, as a result, now they're an ex-offender. What is your office doing? What is it doing about situations like this on the bail system?
That's a good question. As you know, effective July 1st this year, the federal court put an order that says now we have to have detention hearings on the 22nd Judicial Circuit. So we have these detention hearings, and we have to show where a person should be held because they're a public safety threat. And what we've done is, before this ever happened, we were issuing summonses on low-level nonviolent felonies. That means if you had not a violent crime, it wasn't domestic violence or sexual assault, we would put forth a summons, a notification to come to court, give you a court date without issuing a warrant. That's what we did before the court put a directive on the 22nd Judicial Circuit that they have to redo the way they do bail bond detention hearings. Right now, we're staffing these bail bond detention hearings, and we're offering personal recogs. So we're making a recommendation more of personal recogs, as well as diverting them to alternative types of sentencing if they qualify. So we're using our diversion program to keep more people out the system. And actually, before this new law, we reduced the prison population in the Justice Center, as well, not the Justice Center, I guess the workhouse. I think it was reduced down to only 900 people, which was more before. So a lot of these techniques of alternatives to diversion, as well as our bail bond practices, what we put in place, our policies, one, we're reducing people being held pre-trial. That is a positive. We're also taking more information. So we are working with RC defenders, and we're working with the public defender if there's individuals to identify alternatives to holding someone that has a mental health problem. So we work with Places for People, we work with other organizations that we can refer them to services so they can get the help they need, so they're not held because they have a mental health illness. So we're doing many different things, as well as we've already had a risk assessment, like I said before, that we use to determine whether that individual is high risk, low risk, and needs to be diverted. So we're employing many different things, but one thing about bail bond, I know people don't understand, that's the courts. We just make a recommendation, but the courts make the final decision. So in terms of that bail bond, that has been the courts. For example, what they used to do when you have a gun and drugs, it used to be an automatic $30,000 cash only bond. Right now, they cannot do that anymore, and we refer to alternative programs as well as alternative pretrial programs that person can get out. But it's a work in progress, And right now the courts have ordered the courts to look at how they do their bail bond practices, and we're doing it. So if you're saying where a person is trying to, being held, and they basically have 5 counts, and they say, hey, we'll let you go ahead if you plead these first 2 counts and go ahead on. Well,
let's say they've done 9 months.
yes, and I understand what you're saying. So what we're doing in terms of our policies, we're looking at how public safety, and public safety is also when a person pleads guilty, and we have a better communication with defense attorneys when there's an issue like that. A lot of the defense attorneys are coming to us and saying, hey, you know, there's some alternative, you know, situation, can we do this, can we do that? But that one hypo, you know, that can happen in some instances, I don't know, in limited instances, but we're not forcing people to plead to 2 of the 5 charges in every situation. I can tell you that, because most people are going to trial in my jurisdiction, and I know in that instance when somebody's being held for 9 months, I don't know in that hypo if that person is a serious, violent individual that's been sitting down for 9 months and they have a robbery first or armed criminal action, so that's why they plead guilty. So I can't answer that hypo, but what I can say is what we're doing is we're reforming the way we offer recommendations. We offer more fair recommendations. We actually have an open line of communication with the other side. If there is any circumstances that they want to bring that mitigates the circumstances of their client, we have an open line to the prosecutor's office and we'll do something different. But, you know, what we're doing is trying to figure out a better way to efficiently charge people so we don't have overcharging. So we're not just stacking charges on individuals, okay? We're not just doing that. We're turning some cases away that we can't make to be more efficient and stringent on what we charge, who we charge, and that prevents those situations. But in some instances, some people will do that. But like, I'm not gonna say every instance the person pleads guilty, sit down 9 months, but we are working on that.
One of our problems in the neighborhood is that we got a lot of organizations trying to assist, and so you got 1,000 ideas going around. I suspect you have a strategy for your engagement. If we could have the strategy for your engagement, we could coordinate our community activities around your strategy to help you do your job.
The short answer is yes, we can do that. I don't know if you want me to elaborate further.
That would help.
I think, well, real quickly, we start off with trying to identify who the people are in the neighborhood that are interested in doing something. And they can be individuals or they can be representative of organizations. And then the next thing is we invite them to start looking at just what are the crime issues in the community. What does the data suggest about what the problems are? Then the next simple step, all this is more complicated than that, but I'm just listening simple, is to begin to develop a plan, a written plan to map out just what the issues are versus what people feel they can address. Because sometimes those are different things, right? And then the 4th step is to take a look at who else is doing work in that space. Not only governmental agencies and not-for-profits, but organizations like that are represented here today who are trying to make a difference. The 5th step is to then begin to implement that plan, and the 6th one is to really just kind of stay the course. So that's a very shortened kind of response, but there's a lot more to it than that, but those are the 6 steps. That's kind of the framework.
In terms of, you know, educating justice-involved individuals that they can vote, and that's where it takes for all of us to educate people, because I'll meet people and they're like, well, I got probation. I'm like, well, is it suspended? They're like, I don't know. I'm like, even suspended, you're not on probation. And so I have to talk to them and educate them, but you know, you can vote. You have to just go through the process of restoring your rights. And I think I need each and every one of you to kind of, which I know you guys have voting drives to help them do that, because they can. And we want them to vote. We want to educate all people to vote, even justice-involved individuals, because their vote matters, specifically in a circuit attorney's race where I think it's important that you be treated fairly in the criminal justice system and decrease the numbers of people going into the system. One of the things I like to do in the diversion programs, we really like to put in place restorative justice programs. We like to put in place understanding how the system works for people entering the system and understanding the downfalls of the system. So we have Mr. Khatib who kind of does the real sessions. He can kind of speak to that. Mr. Khatib, you want to kind of speak to what the real sessions are?
Yes, REAL is an acronym, R-E-L-E, which stands for Racial Equity Learning Exchanges. And it's really a space where persons involved can understand the extent to which race is affecting their outcomes and their opportunities or the lack thereof, and engage them in conversations about what they can do about that.
A lot of our divergent participants have to go through those sessions. We also had multiple screenings of the 13th, and now we're starting, even in our office, when they see us, making my prosecutors watch that. It was hard. We had the first viewing about a month ago, and most of them could not sit in there. But I couldn't sit in there for it, because I want us to understand the realization that this system, this thing, if you're not about, one, identifying when something looks wrong, then it can get out of control. And so we as prosecutors, even people affected by a case, what I want to do is emerge everyone who is in the criminal justice system to understand that as prosecutors, you have power, and your power that you wield, you have to wield it appropriately and fairly and justly. And when we try to force something, or we do not understand the power in which prosecutors have, we can have situations like the exonerated 5, which is just disheartening. We can have situations where we have young people who don't even understand if they're going through the system, because you'll be surprised when you say realization of what the system can do. I have mothers, I have relatives, grandmothers screaming at me, just let them plead guilty. And I'm like, let them plead guilty? I'm the prosecutor advocating for your son to get or daughter to get an alternative, and you're saying let them plead guilty because they don't understand what the system will do. They don't understand. They think it's this quick fix, get on paper, because everybody is on paper, and it's people who are forever affected that are telling young people just to plead guilty. And I'm like, wait a minute, hold up. I'm the prosecutor who's going in court fighting with judges not to terminate people because they are traumatized and they smoke weed. I'm not saying I advocate young people to smoke weed, but if they're not picking up another case and they drop dirty this one time, let's get them back on track instead of violating them and saying now your case goes through the regular case processing system. We have to do better. The number one fueler of mass incarceration is probation and parole, and we fail to realize that. We think the people that we're sending away are the murderers, the robbers, the rapists. No, it's the nonviolent individuals who, for a technicality, get violated. Now they're going to prison, and they're coming back out, and they're going to prison. We have to stop that cycle, and we spend millions of dollars this nonviolent cycle. We ask people who have a crime to get a job, but they know they can't even knock on the door. No one's gonna hire them, but then you saying go get a job, and you gotta have a job within 30 days. Pay all these fees. How can we're putting people in the hole? And so in my programs within my office for training, as well as for people that we're dealing with, we have these tough discussions about the system and what we need to do better. We have restorative justice talks so that young person can face their accuser, and sometimes that's harder than going to court when they face their accuser. We want to strengthen our restorative justice model for these young offenders because they need to see what their mistake has done to the whole community, not just that victim. And you can ask them, they're afraid to confront the community. So we're implementing this, we're implementing training, we had implicit bias training, and we have to do more, but there's a lot more to do because I want my prosecutors to know when you send someone to prison, you should know what a prison feels like. So we need to see what that prison looks like, because it's not, I mean, people think just sending somebody to prison is just another day. No, that forever changes that person's life. It changes the community's life. And so I want us to be put in those situations where we all suffer, we all lose. And I think by doing that, by immersing your prosecutors as well as everyone inside that office in a world that your decisions affect someone's life for the good or the bad, you have to understand the damaging effects when you make that decision, and make it wisely and make it fairly. So.
Okay, on that note, let's give another round of applause. I ran, there was no black governors. Today, 2019, there's still no black governors. When I ran for governor in 1984 in the United States Senate, out of 100 senators, none was black. 2019, only 3 are black, and they say we 13% of the population. We should have at least 13% of the governors ought to look like us, that control billions and trillions of dollars. In the United States Senate, there's 100 senators, we should have at least 13. That's why we had Ask Coffee to run last year in 2018, because if we don't do it, who's going to do it? So to that end, we're going to have this political conference. We have people from across the country coming here to St. Louis in Ferguson. We say in Ferguson will be ground zero. And we're going to have a 2-part event. One is a meet and greet, which will be featuring black elected officials. And it's going to be at the Ferguson Community Center. And the next day is going to be at St. Mark Family Church. We're going to get ready to close out with a prayer. But one thing I want to say and repeat one more time, because as I was looking at the whole theory of Garvey, and our organization motto is one God, one God. We changed his from one name, we say one goal, one destiny. And what we're saying is, when we say one God, we're saying we're not tripping on people's religion. Right. We say that we all agree there's something that's tougher than us. That's right. So that's why we say one God. Right. We say one goal because the goal should be the liberation of us as a people. Amen. And one thing I hate, I'm 72. I wish I had my people liberated so my son and grandson don't have to deal with what we deal with. But we got to struggle. Maybe God will bless me to see that day. And we say one destiny because God don't bless us when we get up our far behinds and do what we're supposed to do. So on that note, I want to close out before we do the prayer one more time. Going to God. Up! You mighty race. Let me hear you say that. Up! You mighty race. You can accomplish what you will. You can accomplish what you will. We got to take that motto all across St. Louis, Missouri, the United States, Africa, wherever we are. On that note, Reverend Crosby closes out.
Everybody, God bless all of you. Let us pray. Merciful and loving God, again we thank and praise you for your presence, for your intervention in all of our issues and concerns, for your support of our circuit attorney. Lord, continue to protect her and grant her your peace and your vision and direction for us, for your people, your children. Bless us now, Lord, as we dismiss from this place. Never, ever allow us to be away from your presence, always keeping us embraced in your love, your safety, and protection. Bless each and every household, all of our families, our friends, loved ones, and neighbors. And oh Lord, our God, please protect and watch over our children. Keep them all safe and in your care. Until we meet again, in the majesty of your holy and righteous name we pray. Amen.
If you can introduce yourself for us, please.
I'm Darrell Gray. I'm the secretary of the Missouri State Democratic Party.
Congratulations on that. And from what I understand, you were just elected that position.
Just elected yesterday. We had a state meeting of all of our state committee people representing congressional districts, senatorial districts, House districts across the state. And I won overwhelmingly, so I'm pretty proud of that.
And we're happy you're here at a Marcus Garvey celebration where Circuit Attorney Kim Gardner stopped by. What does this type of community involvement mean to you?
I mean, I think for the Democratic Party, black voters have always been the most loyal voters. We represent the base of the Democratic Party. Marcus Garvey talked about self-determination. He talked about self-respect and self-awareness. He talked about us being able to do for ourselves. And so, within the Democratic Party, because we are the more loyal base, we want to make sure that the Democratic Party supports diversity and inclusion and equity. And that means identifying qualified black candidates, training and equipping qualified black candidates so that our districts can be represented, not just in the urban area, but suburban areas as well.
So you just talk about a little bit about my next question. What exactly do you do as as the director for the state of Missouri?
Well, as the secretary, my job really is to keep all the records and archives of the Democratic Party. But I'm also charged with anything that the state chair would designate for me to do. It may be working directly with minority candidates. It may be training canvassers. So, you know, my job is to make sure that within the Democratic Party we function on identifying policies and issues that specifically address the black plight, be it poverty, be it mass incarceration, be it criminal justice reform. As a state party, elected state party leader, that's my responsibility to make sure that the black perspective is always heard and the black agenda is always on the table of the Democratic Party.